We're in volume 4. We're in volume 4. Okay. Bible story, volume 4. It's got a picture of David and Goliath on here. Okay. We're at part 1, story 11, night adventure. And remember, I'm reading from 70-year-old books. Okay. David was now back in the wilderness at Zeph. And one day, to his surprise, he heard that Saul was coming after him again. And he could hardly believe his ears. After what had happened in the cave, when he and the king had such a friendly chat together, he had thought there would be no more trouble between them. And here was Saul pursuing him again, as he had done so many times before. To make quite sure that the story was true, David, and then paused, sent out spies, and understood that Saul was come in very deed. Saddened by the news, David wrote a beautiful prayer now found in the 54th Psalm. 54, Psalm 54, in my version. Talk. Save me, O God, from by thy name, and judge me by thy strength. Hear my prayer, O God. Give ears to the words of my mouth. Pause. Behold, God is my helper. The Lord is with them that uphold my soul. And then a pause. And then the reason why I'm pausing is because it skips verses and fluid, in because it probably get a little thing. All right, let me get back to the story. I will freely sacrifice unto thee, and I will praise thy name. I will praise thy name, O Lord, for it is good. This time David and his men did not flee. Instead, in the dead of night, they crept towards the place where Saul and his soldiers were encamped. Closer and closer they moved until they could make out every place where Saul and Abner, his chief captain, were sleeping. Saul, they noticed, was in the center of the camp, in the midst of the baggage. Abner was near him, while the rest of the soldiers lay on the ground around them. Everybody was fast asleep. Not a sound was to be heard, save the snoring of some of the soldiers, the occasional bray of the donkey, and the whinny of a horse. Suddenly David whispered to two of his bravest men, "Who will go down with me to Saul to the camp?" "I will," said Abishai. Ab, Abi, Abishai. Abishai. I'm going to say Abishai. 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 Without thought of a terrible risk they were taking, the two brave men crept forward. What if a dog should bark? What if a sentinel could see them? If they should wake the camp, they would not stand a chance. On they went, carefully, not to step on any of the sleeping soldiers. And then it has a little drawing, and it is a different one. It is by Vernon Knight, and it looks more like what I see from some of the old comic books. back here and see, I like all kinds of stuff. And it does look like it's a more comic book like to me. Comic book illustration. Even this on top of this page looks like looks more like a comic book to me. From Vernon 9. At last they found Saul, sound asleep, his head on a bolster. Beside him was his spear, stuck in the ground, and a cruse or bottle of water. So there was a bottle of water sitting right there. As Abishai looked down at the man who had given David and his men so much trouble, he longed to kill him then and there. Let me smite him, he prayed, I pray thee, with the spear, even to the earth at once, he whispered to David, and I will not smite him the second time. But David would not let him do it. Destroy him not, he said, for who can stretch forth his hand against the Lord's anointed and be guiltless? And then it skips verses. As the Lord liveth, the Lord shall smite him, or his day shall come, to die, and he shall descend into battle and perish. That is the prophecy there. But let's get back to the story. So once more he showed his faith in God, heading God's leading for his life. Then with the same trace of mischief which he had shown in the cave when he cut off Saul's garment, he whispered to Abishai, take thou now the spear that is in his bolster, and the cruse of water, and let's go. All silent as they had come, the two men crept out of the camp. Then David went over to the other side and stood on a hilltop far off, a great space between them. So he really long way, because voices do carry along. It must have been very early in the morning, for when he shouted, nobody answered. Everybody in the camp was still asleep. Then he called again across the valley at the top of his voice, answerest thou not, Abner? Abner got up, very much out of sorts. Who art thou that criest for the king? He roared. Art not thou a valiant man? Valiant man. Art thou not a valiant man? Taunted David. Oh, he was talking to Abner. And who is like to thee in Israel? Wherefore hast thou not kept thy Lord thy king? Where hast thou not kept thy Lord and king? Then pause. Now see where the king's spear is, and the cup of water, cruse of water, that was at his bolster. Who is it? I can hear Abner muttering. What is he talking about? And then I'll show you the illustration. It has them way far away. But back then, the voice could carry. We didn't have as much noise as what we have. We have all kinds of noises now. But this, But he knew David's voice, and called back, "Is this thy voice, my son David?" But Saul knew rewind. But Saul knew David's voice and called back, "Is this thy voice, my son David?" "It is my voice, my lord, O king," he said. Then again he asked the question he had asked so many times before. "What have I done? Or what evil is in thine hand?" When Saul saw that his spear and his cruse of water in David's hand, he realized that David must have been by his bed that night, and said, "I have sinned. Return, my son David. Return, my son David. For I will no more do thee harm, because my soul was precious in thine eyes this day. Behold, I have played a fool, and have erred exceedingly." This was the truest thing Saul had ever said. The pity was he said it too late. David was ready to forgive. David was ready to, as ever, to forgive. He called back, "Behold, the king's spear, and let one of the young men come over and fetch it." The king was grateful. "Behold, blessed be thou, my son David," he said. "Thou hast both do great thou hast both do great things, and also shalt still prevail." It was a very happy ending to a long quarrel. I think they said it was about 20 years, 25, almost 30 years that they did that. I'm not sure. You may have to look it up. David and his men went to Gath, and Saul sought no more against him. And then, of course, as a picture of the messenger or the young man with the spear returning it back to Saul. There it is. And it don't have, it's not as comic book as the other one, of course, was comic book. But it doesn't have anybody's name on it. Yeah, it does. I really can't make it out. Oh, it is Vernon. Okay, it is Vernon on. It is comic book book. Okay, that was story 11 and part 1. So I'm gonna take a break, and then I'm gonna start on the next story. So give me a minute.